Hey, we're talking markets with Tommy Grisafi from Advanced Trading, ATI ProMedia. Tommy, this market on fire today. It's almost like Wednesday didn't happen. We had some big gains here at the end of the session.
Monster day, Don. It's all about the American dollar. Came out of nowhere, kind of. You look at a dollar chart. If anyone needs to go look at a chart, go to barchart.com. Look at a dollar chart. 4 big down days. And you know, the dollar's been going sideways for a while, and that's something we talk a lot about on this show. I mean, everyone likes to talk about it. Strong dollar, weak dollar. But we have a weak dollar. And the reason I can say that, it's trading below 100, 99.50 on the dollar futures right now, which means commodities and goods that our clients, the people watching the show, grow, became on sale when you look at other countries. Like Mexico came in a big way looking for beans this morning. And you look at what happened, that USDA report. You and I were scheduled to do this tomorrow, Friday. I said, Don, let's do it today. There's just too much news. The way corn, beans, wheat, cattle closed, the stock market's on the highs. There's so many moving parts. And for all those naysayers who said, you know, that report was so bearish and it's over, or the stock market's going to collapse because we're raising interest rates, that's not happening. Look at the stock market, another big day. Look at the cattle market, came back from the lows. So many moving parts. How does it end up? What's moving these markets? And you and I are going to talk about it today a little bit.
Let's look at that report if we can. Obviously, the USDA made some tweaks, made some adjustments in the carryover. Soybeans were what the trade was looking at, less than 200 million bushels, and we came in at 300. That certainly was enough to surprise the trade yesterday.
Right. So as they came out with that 52 bushel yield, they didn't cut yield, and I can see why they didn't do that. We've had enough rains here in June and July here to maybe keep that yield. Also, if they did cut the yield to 51, it would take so much off our carryout that all of a sudden the markets would become really tight. So soybeans are going to be made the whole month of August. And how do we finish up in September? I think particularly where you live, for the most part on the northern plains, things look great. But as you go north of you in Canada, folks, you can, just like you can search the American drought map, you can look at the Canadian drought map. And there's a lot of drought on that Canadian drought map. That's affecting things like spring wheat. Canola, absolutely on fire. One of the things that stood out for that USDA report is how negative the beans were in price action, that we had traded from up 20 to down 35. You know, canola closed up on the day on that USDA report. Come into today, it's like that report never happened. So yes, very impressed that the USDA did drag down that corn yield, but they kept the bean yield right there at 52. And, there's no sense of them really backing into a tough number to then have to back out of it. So they're going to ease their way if that yield goes lower. These genetics are great. There's no saying that we still couldn't grow a big bean crop. We might have taken a little of the top end off the corn crop. And there are still people with problems. You said you were driving to Minnesota and saw some rough corn, Don.
I was out Monday in central Minnesota, St. Cloud, Kimball area, and boy, that corn was just, it was fried. It was in really tough shape in that area.
Yeah, and there's still parts of the country who are having problems. I will say personally, I have some really bad backyarditis. I'm in Valparaiso, Indiana. I went for a walk early this morning. It was almost cold out. You come into July 15 days thinking that it's cold out, and we had 2 inches of rain yesterday. We are growing bushels. Everyone's running around saying if you're going to have a drought, springtime's the time to have it. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe springtime was the time to have the drought. Maybe the rains are coming just in time. It seems to me, and this is going to upset some people. If it upsets you, you can call me, you could text me. The people who are complaining that corn actually has to go up because the crop's so bad have the least amount sold, the least amount protected. If you watch corn be at $6 all winter, break down to $4.90, rally to $6.30, sold nothing, watched it break to $4.80. Now the calls and the text of, I know someone in Missouri. I drove by that same field Don Wick did. It's all dead. We are much closer to growing a big corn crop than we are ruining the corn crop. But the beans, the month of August, extreme volatility in the bean market in the months to come.
I looked at the 7-day outlook before we got on here, Tommy, and it looks like this upcoming week, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas are going to miss the rain. Nebraska, very limited the way it looks. How long are we going to be talking weather when we look at this current scenario?
Probably the next 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even a few weeks after that. Let's hope we're not talking frost or anything else for our sugar beet growers or any grower who needs to finish up that crop. But we have 4 to 6 weeks of weather, and then we have to be in the bushel business. Number one, did you grow a crop? Two, can you store all your crop? Three, what do you have forward sold? What do you have forward protected? How are your financial needs? How much money do you have out there at 8, 9%? Do you want to pay down debt? You're going to see a lot of bushels change hands here into OND. October, November, December, we're going to see some grain come to town and some people pay off some operating notes. The rest, they're going to do store and ignore, which is not a new play by the farmer. But store and ignore is going to cost the most it has in the last 30, 35 years with interest rates at this elevated level, Don.
CPI came out yesterday. We were looking at what, 3% inflation rate. I just saw a report from CoBank, and they were talking about looking at the monetary policy that we really haven't seen the impact. They're talking recession likely in the fourth quarter. What do you see as far as the economic play in this marketplace?
And it's interesting because someone's calling the word recession. The stock market's exploding. The stock market's on the highs. The grain markets had a big day. Gold had a big day. Silver's almost $25 an ounce. There's some commodities like crude oil at $76 a barrel. You have the dollar at 15-month lows. We're gonna. Inflation's a tricky thing. You're not even old enough to remember the 80s, but I'm telling you, inflation's like a cancer, and you have to nuke it. And you don't just give it half the medicine. The Fed gave it the medicine by raising interest rates. How are they going to get this soft landing? It's going to be tricky. You're still seeing some weakness like in homes and new homes, but yet we don't have enough homes out there. So some markets are pumping the brakes and others are full steam ahead. I bet you if I drove around right now where you are up north in North Dakota and Grand Forks, I bet you every other business has a help wanted sign. As long as there's help wanted signs and there's jobs for Americans, yes, everyone thinks AI is going to take over everything. Well, it didn't do it this week, brother. Help wanted means that if you want to work in America, you can. If you want to prosper, you can. There's still a lot of opportunity to create wealth and gain wealth here in America.
So we saw in the livestock sector that the hogs came back today, triple-digit gains. But I looked at yesterday when that corn sold off. What happened in cattle and hogs? I guess I would have thought they would have been doing a little better than the way they ended up.
Well, it wasn't like, we had that USDA report at the end of June, and when that corn number came out bearish, feeder cattle closed up 550. When that number came out yesterday and people saw beans, meal, oil, corn sell off, they came in and bought live cattle, feeder cattle with both hands, ramped it up. All of a sudden, there was no one there. And when the bids came in, when the people started selling to hit the bids, there were no bids. There was a lot of people who bought cattle yesterday just watching that bearish corn number, and it flipped. And yesterday was interesting because you saw feeder cattle come close to $4 off its high. And you saw live cattle and feeder cattle close on the low with corn down 18, which is interesting because you come in today, now corn's up 18, and you're like, did the feeder cattle market tell us that corn was going to bounce? Because people who are professional traders in the cattle market, they are watching the corn and the meal all day long. It's a big part of the equation into raising and finishing that animal. So there's a big move. A lot of people run around saying maybe the top's in. Feeders and live cattle were down pretty low today, but they bounced back. Live cattle ended up closing real close to on the highs of the day.
We talked to a lot of auction barns, and these cull count numbers still are very strong this summer. Much higher than where we were a year ago. That's got to really impact where we're going to be sitting as far as the count numbers going forward. There's got to be some legs to this.
Yeah, absolutely. The math of being in the cattle industry, it's extremely expensive to be in the cattle industry, and the amount of dollars that are going to be needed. I know from a banking standpoint, although you may have cattle now that you own and you own them from a lower price, how do you sell your cattle and go replace them with such high-priced cattle? Where do you get the money to do this, and what's your risk? Moving forward, we come in these bull markets in cattle, and there's a lot of opportunity to make money, but the bear markets are horrible, and they put people out of business. And it doesn't take long in the cattle industry or any industry to go from the best of times to the worst of times. I hope that doesn't happen in cattle, but I will tell you this. Every time I go to the grocery store, I'm having a hard time buying the fine cuts of beef because they're so expensive. We've been cooking a lot. I bought a Traeger, and And we've been cooking a lot more ribs and pork loins and other things because I can even mess it up on the grill, and I'm not too upset if it's a pork loin. But you go buy a couple $100 worth of beef and overcook it, you're going to be real mad at yourself, Don.
You mentioned earlier about my trip down to Minnesota. The House Ways and Means Committee had a field hearing in Kimball, Minnesota on Monday. A lot of times these field hearings, you might see 3-4 lawmakers there. They had 20 congressional representatives at the table on a farm in Kimball, Minnesota, talking agricultural trade, which I think is pretty significant. Certainly they all talked about the need for trade agreements. They talked about enforcement, Mexico's ban on biotech corn imports, Canada's pretty restrictive dairy policy. All of those things got a lot of attention. It was a 3-hour hearing, and I guess I was just wanted to take note. Pretty significant when you see a meeting like that outside of the Beltway taking place in rural Minnesota.
But it's interesting. I was on a show before this, and we talked about how you get to vote with your wallet every day. Maybe there's a presidential election every 4 years. The consumer gets to vote every day, and the farmer needs to go out there and voice their opinion. It makes me happy to hear that so many elected officials are learning, getting educated, debating, talking about the pros and cons of what's currently happening in agriculture.
So for our folks that are with us today, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to experience this market, what do they have to do, Tommy?
Give us a call, Advanced Trading, 1-800-664-4383. There'll be a link in this video on how to get a hold of me. Of course, we ask everyone to subscribe to the Advanced Trading channel, the YouTube channel. You and I will be producing a lot more shows like this, Don.
Good deal, Tommy. As always, we appreciate the chance to connect. Tommy Grisafi with us, Advanced Trading, ATI, ProMedia.